a Nobody's Project production. Sitting on a shelf at the Harvard Medical School's Warren Anatomical Museum in Cambridge, Massachusetts, are two interesting and socially significant items. One of them is a metre-long iron rod, and the other is a human skull. On closer inspection, the skull is damaged, and there are fractures all through the front left side of the skull's cheek and forehead, and a large yet healed hole at the top of the centre of the skull, just above a normal hairline. The skull is real, and it belongs to a man who survived a horrific incident and lived to tell the tale. But the tale of this person and their incredible survival story has been spun and weaved over the last 180 years, and so now it's a difficult one to retell without throwing in the necessary caveats. For neuroscientists and other academic fields, this incident and the subsequent recovery in some way refocused their studies on the brain and started many new lines of inquiry. Phineas Gage was born in July 1823 on a family farm in New Hampshire, United States. He was a tall, well-built young man, and by the age of 25, he was the foreman overseeing the blasting of rocks to clear the way for a new railway in New England. By all accounts, he was a good manager and was liked by his team and employers. One day in September 1848, Phineas was finishing up packing down the explosive charge to break up some large rocks when the charge ignited and the rod missiled back up through Phineas's lower left jaw, up behind his left eye, and exited his skull out the top front of his head, an inch above his hairline. Phineas collapsed, but it is believed he didn't lose consciousness initially. He was treated by Dr. John Martin Harlow, and it took the next few months for Gage to physically recover. This shocked many medical professionals of the time, including Henry Jacob Bigelow of the Harvard Medical School. The most profound change to Phineas Gage after he finally recovered and was able to go back into his community was his change in personality. He had not lost many memories, and he still had all his motor skills and rational mind, but his social skills appeared to be impacted. It's at this stage of the story that we need to add a caveat. Prior to the incident, it wasn't well known what type of character Phineas Gage was, but the written records of the time clearly indicates that after his recovery, he was no longer the Gage he was prior to the incident. His personality had changed, and he was more abrasive and very disengaged. After making a full recovery, Phineas didn't continue his career in railroad construction. He at one stage was part of an oddities and curiosities show, and he eventually moved to Mexico where he ran a stagecoach. It is clear from the records that Phineas Gage continued his life as an upstanding citizen, as there's no evidence of his behaviour descending into a life of crime. And from what we now know of the significant changes trauma to the frontal lobe of the brain can have, Phineas's story is not one of just survival, but also one of rehabilitation and reintegration back into the community after such a significant incident. It has only been the last few decades that we have started to piece together how our neural structures across all our lobes affect different parts of our cognition, movement, senses, and our other deeper, more complex behaviours: empathy, reason, abstraction, contextualization, logic, and others. Once we started on this new path of inquiry, with evidence coming from incidents like Phineas Gage, we started to compile more and more evidence supporting these new findings. But it hasn't been a straightforward path. Remembering that thinking about the thing that we think with is one of the hardest things we can do. So it's no wonder Constantine's discovery and identification of the von Economo neurons, the VENs, in the 1920s didn't re-emerge in the neuroscientists' radar until the late 1990s. But as we extend those findings into the 2010s with the discovery of the loss of VENs due to conditions like frontotemporal dementia having direct effects on socio-cognition and emotional awareness, we can now also extend this knowledge across all facets of society. We can reinterpret the world around us better by factoring the clear linkage between a person's hardware and software, their brain and their behaviour. We can now refocus our eyes and answer the question, why the fuck did they do that? And we can also start finding ways forward through better conversations and start to understand why those around us are the way they are. Too Many Arseholes is a social project looking at the rise of pathological behaviours in our society and the erosion of social trust, creating a better conversation around why this is and finding a way forward to a greater humanity. This podcast is also part of a larger social project that we want you, the listener, to join in on. Key to this project is bringing together threads from many academic disciplines to create a body of knowledge we can develop with you to help us all with having better conversations around these pathological behaviours in our personal and social circles. If you are joining us now, we suggest you go back and listen from episode 1 through, as we are building up this social project's themes and ideas over this initial series of monologues. Thanks again for joining us today for Season 1, Episode 8. Today we start to apply all this new knowledge and develop this new perspective. We start approaching this new view from a place of empathy, and we dive into authentic and inauthentic people. With these new insights, we reflect on ourselves and the wider world around us. It's this new perspective that will underpin these better conversations we are wanting to have. And so thanks for joining us and coming along on this journey of reflection and discovery as we attempt to unpack and better understand why there's just too many arseholes. We are going to start today's episode with a little activity. If you have an old VCR or DVD player and some videos or DVDs that haven't been remastered for modern TVs, then you've got all the stuff we need for today. If you haven't watched anything on your old VCR recently, then you may want to try this activity out sometime and reintroduce yourself to 80s and 90s tech. If you have watched something recently on an old VCR, then let's get into it. For this exercise to work, you must be watching the movie through a new flat screen TV. The bigger, the better. Once you get over the nostalgia of the experience, you start to notice all the flaws in the movie's production. The sound quality available back then, and also how media, especially video media, degrades so quickly over time. The amazing special effects from the 80s and 90s now look amateur and unrealistic. The green screens are noticeable, and the editing around the effects limitations influenced how the narrative was presented. And we loved it. As the movie progresses on your VCR, all the wondrous feelings you had when you first watched the movie may be shaken a little. That lifelike dinosaur now looks obviously done by animatronics. You also may be forced to reassess how you feel about the movie. Have you lost the wonderment you initially had towards this film? Can you be more critical of the cast, the directing, editing, and the sound production? It may be that you avoid this situation because you don't want to ruin some of your favourite memories from your past. The reason why this experience may be a little jolting when you revisit an old classic being played in its original form is because of the high fidelity of the new TV screens and sound systems drawing out the imperfections. The smaller pixels and enhanced sound profiles accentuate the imperfections you wouldn't have noticed on the old VCR and TVs. And you're not angry or disappointed by this. It's understandable why these movies look different now than they did when they were first released. In some way, you may feel a little empathy or sadness because the original experience has been lost to time. And it's this experience that best sums up what today's episode is all about. Over the last few decades, we have vastly increased our understanding of the human brain. Initially aided by the creation of more and more powerful microscopes, imaging, and scanning devices, our neuroscientists have begun to put the pieces of information we have together to better understand how our hardware affects our software, how our brains affect our decisions and behaviours, and now our psychologists and psychiatrists are able to better align psychological principles with neuroscience findings. And so it's at this initial part of the Too Many Arseholes social project that we want to take all the knowledge we've compiled so far and start to look back and reinterpret our histories, our personal past and our own childhoods using this sharper, higher fidelity perspective. It has always been a challenge through history to understand humans and their behaviours. We have multiple academic disciplines dedicated to pulling apart and applying rationale and reasoning to our different behaviours. Philosophy, anthropology, psychology and psychiatry to name some of the more prominent social sciences. However, until we started grasping that our person, our personality, our character is derived somewhat from our genetic history and that it can be affected by substandard or abusive childhoods, traumatic brain injury, and other forms of abuse, we will continue to maintain an implicit understanding that all adult humans can be judged and assessed on their conduct equally. Our laws and social standards dictate this. But now we know that some people just don't have the hardware to run the software. They can't think in this higher socially minded way. If all our laws and other guidelines of social behaviour are predicated on each human having the ability to behave humanely, then where does that leave us with psychopathic and sociopathic people, their decisions and their behaviours? They don't feel guilty when they lie. They use people around them for their own benefit without skipping a beat. Their facade of charisma, positiveness and refinement hides a mind that is only able to think about their own needs. And so our rules and laws aren't there to maintain social cohesion in their mind. Rules and laws are just limitations, lines to cross, things to not get caught doing. The operative word there is caught. But for someone who has these socio-emotional deficiencies, should we judge them as scum, bad people, evil personified? It's not their fault that they were given poor genes, that they were victims of poor parenting or societal pressures during their early developmental years, that they've struggled in their teenage or adult years with alcohol, being impacted by abuse of all kinds, traumatic brain injury, or even dementia. Their ability to work within society is limited, and they just don't know why. Until recently, we didn't know why either. We locked them up in prisons, mental asylums, or eventually gave them the keys to the executive suite. Regardless of where a person with pathological tendencies finds a place in this world to fit in, we have to be considerate and empathetic towards them. They can't understand how social cohesion works. They can't trust because they can't be trusted. It is a social deficiency that unfortunately capitalism plays into. It's hard to feel empathetic for someone who has multiple millions to billions of dollars, but they are not human inside to some degree. Their persona is finely crafted and not built on solid social grounding. They are inauthentic when they cosplay as a socially trustworthy person. And so now with our higher fidelity insights, we can now not only see the pathological behaviours and pathological people around us, but we can also see their flaws, their failings, and we can understand why their past has brought them to this point. We can now also identify these behaviours. We can understand and articulate people and behaviours that are not completely psychopathic in nature, but somewhere between that and a socially trustworthy person. And most importantly, we can be proactive, not reactive about these conversations. Once we build upon these base foundations for this better conversation, we stop reacting to pathological people by swearing and throwing our hands up in the air. We can be more considerate, more cautious, and more prepared for when we need to act. It may surprise you that it's taken us up until episode 8 to pull authenticity out of our box of subjects and address it as an important part to better understanding pathological people and pathological behaviours. And yes, it is a subject that we've kicked the can down the road for a few good reasons. The first being that this subject has been tackled recently on podcasts like Stuff to Blow Your Mind, where they did a 3-part mini-series on authenticity back in March 2024. The second reason being that being authentic and displaying authenticity is in fact a very difficult subject to nail down. It has many cultural variations and the word can be used in a variety of contexts. At this early stage in the project, we're going to limit the subject of authenticity to being focused on the alignment or misalignment between a person's decisions and actions and their words and public persona. It's not a stable place to anchor this conversation, but it will have to do for now. All we get from the Merriam-Webster dictionary is authenticity is being true to one's own personality, spirit, or character. Authenticity is something we feel before we identify. When you associate with people, their authenticity or inauthenticity can be palpable. It helps us engage more or retract from these interactions. It is also a good red flag to identify and assess someone's pathologicalness, but is not as simple as being authentic equals being a trustworthy person. If a person is a complete psychopath and they let you know it, If they show no falsities in their intentions and they don't pretend to be anything else other than a complete prick, well, then isn't that being authentic? Likewise, someone who comes across as a dependable tough guy, someone who is good in a challenging situation and someone with skills can be relied upon, but then they fail to show up when needed and don't have the skills when required, then, unless shit really hits the fan, you may think they are authentic, but really, they're inauthentic. To really test someone's authenticity, you need to stress test them. People will go to extraordinary lengths to present their best self and to appear more than they actually are. So don't be afraid to test these people. Ask them follow-up questions, but do it in a socially acceptable way. Pathological people don't particularly like being challenged. This is where they tend to switch from their proactive, finely crafted persona to reactive behaviour. How we present ourselves at home, at work, and in public is such an important part of 21st century living. When we put social media in the mix, we have this hyper-realistic, unobtainable, finely crafted and toxic expectation of ourselves and others. In some circles, being authentic isn't only uncommon, it's out of favour, suppressed, or unwanted. The inner circles of the corporate world is no place for authenticity. Fitting the mould, falling in line, not standing out are all common expectations across most industries and institutions. But this often gets misinterpreted as being no place for humanity, no place for people to be people, a place where everyone has to align to some ill-defined standard of behaviour, something higher than the normal humdrum of society. But isn't the normal humdrum of society us working together at our best? Isn't another way to look at these pathological, toxic places as cultures created by pathological people who through their successes believe they are better than others and then proceed to create work cultures they understand, work cultures with no humanity, no consideration for the wide variety of lives that their employees live. These corporate leaders sprinkle their employees with promises of this and that, of bonuses and incentives. It's using money to motivate people. It's all they have and all they understand. And if businesses don't go well, it's these promises and bonuses that are the first things to go. The executive class always makes sure their personal incentives and bonuses are paid out one way or the other. And it's in these higher corporate roles that we will find many examples of inauthentic people. The corporate structures draw them in, allowing them to succeed through their own ruthlessness. And they can all cosplay their happy, trustworthy charades all day. And so a great place to study inauthentic people is in the corporate workplace. If you do work in a corporate role and you don't have significant psychopathic traits, well done. How do you survive? Is the money that good? Do you roleplay being pathological at work more than you are comfortable with? Do you work in a company that is actually humane in how they run the show? The rise of pathological corporate cultures is a major theme of this social project that we will dip back into over many episodes. If you have an experience you'd like to contribute, we'd love to hear from you. We decided to call this episode Refocusing Our Eyes, to hone in on probably the most critical piece of this social project. To have these better conversations, you need to be able to pick up on the pathological behaviours that are present and right in front of you. It's this shift in perspective from accepting and normalising pathological behaviours to seeing these decisions' behaviours for what they actually are. So it's with our eyes that we see these pathological decisions and behaviours unfold. We'll still hear all the bullshit pathological people make up, and we can't really taste or smell pathological behaviours. Although, when you metaphorically smell something is fishy, it's often the work of an antisocial actor. And when it comes to touch and pathological behaviours, well, we're not going there today. To help get this concept of refocusing our eyes across, we're going to take you on a little journey into your own past. We're going to take you on a walk back through your childhood and maturing years. And that's 0 to 25 years for this activity. You probably don't have many memories of your first 5 years of life, but hopefully you do have some knowledge of your parents and the home environment you were born into. Was your early child home life a happy one? A positive and safe environment? Was there a lot of alcohol consumed at home? Did your mum drink while carrying or breastfeeding you? Have a good think and maybe do some digging into your early years. From here, we now step into your primary school years. By this age, you have grown your full complement of Venns and mirror neurons, and you are starting to engage with the world around you. Most children at this stage are still grasping basic social cues and are practicing the social techniques your family and community have shown you. If you are still carrying regrets and/or anxiety from things you did at this age, you really should try to forgive yourself for this. You are only in your first decade of life. If an adult punished you or blamed you for your actions, then they are the ones that are pathological. It is inhumane to blame anyone underage. That is what being underage is all about. Yes, some kids are very antisocial and are pathological in nature, but they still have time to grow and mature out of this if it isn't a genetic, psychopathic reason. As we step into the next phase, puberty, you are still forming your social persona. It is very natural for teenagers to test boundaries, break rules, and use sometimes non-conventional methods to figure out exactly what being a trusted member of society means. At this stage in your upbringing, it is still inhumane to blame a teenager or punish them for this natural maturing process. We shouldn't expect children under legal age to carry these burdens through life. So if you are still carrying some anxiety from your past, especially your teenage years, then refocus your eyes on your teenage years using this latest scientific information and higher fidelity perspective. Know that we will all have made bad decisions, mistakes, and pushed some boundaries too far. But that is normal and natural, and so you can forgive yourself. Let it go. You were only a child or a teenager back then. If your family or community didn't give you a good chance at maturing into a socially responsible adult, then you will need to find forgiveness for them as well. The knowledge guiding parents to bringing up healthy and socially responsible young people is lacking in all areas. Your parents probably didn't know. They most likely smoked while you were in the car back then. And that doesn't even start to address all the misinformation that has been put out there over the last few decades on parenting. When you graduated from high school and started your adult life through further education, a trade, or other workplace paths, you really are thrown in the deep end of society. Unlike America, that at least gets this bit right, they stagger some of their social responsibilities, like 16 years of age to get a car, 10 years old to be able to vote, and 21 years old to be able to drink. Most other Western nations, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and the UK, all have it that around the age of 18, you can drive, drink, and vote. You can even become Prime Minister at this age technically. We really haven't thought this through like the Americans have on this occasion. It is an intelligent social structure to slowly introduce young adults to more and more responsibilities. Getting a gun license and owning guns is a sensitive issue, and if you've grown up around guns, then you may not understand what all the fuss is about. But aside from all the back and forth on gun control, especially in America, Americans also have a staggered age restriction on firearms. You must be over 18 years of age for long-arm firearms, and you must be over 21 years to carry a handgun in some states, which appears to be a better approach than most of the other nations that have a blanket 18 years old policy for almost all of the adult activities. New Zealand, we love you and you do so many things well, but you do give out gun licenses at 16 years of age. 16-year-olds don't have a fully matured brain at that age. No judgment, but it's food for thought. And so now you round out your maturation journey as you take your place in society in your early 20s. The world is at your feet. You've been given the keys to the world and you are old enough to do anything. Do you still carry trauma or anxiety from your own actions in your 20s? Looking back at your past from your highest socially capable age, your mid-30s onwards, adults in their early 20s are all behaving like bunnies in the headlights. And a young adult's maturity pathway shouldn't stop there. Good career pathway structures are built around taking people from university or other higher education and then putting them into a 5 to 10 year pathway before they take on larger responsibilities, with thousands of people trusting them to be considerate and humane towards all their employees. Although legally, if you fuck up once you're an adult, you are required to face the full extent of the law. By 18 years of age, you should know better. But the science isn't wrong. People are still maturing all the way through to their mid-30s. So now, hopefully, you can give yourself a little bit of slack for regrets and anxiety you still have from when you were young, and you can also give yourself a little empathy and reassurance that you were a good person in your childhood, teenage, and early adult years. You were just doing what all young people do, learning from your environment and testing out different ways to behave based on what you observe from your surroundings. And it's with this level of empathy that we can now refocus our eyes on the world outside our own. When we start to reinterpret the past and the present with the knowledge that pathological people just can't think socially, that they have to create a life where they are at the center of everything, but portray to everybody else that they are socially trustworthy, that they train themselves to look authentic when it is anything but who they are. We can see through all their bullshit, and there is way more bullshit than we realized. From all the bullshit in advertising, to all the bullshit in health tips, to all the bullshit pseudo-news, and all the bullshit political rhetoric. How much of our current life is all about consumerism? Ads are just everywhere. These businesses want to help you, but only if you give them money. If you're getting something for free, then you are the product. There is bullshit all through our social media, reality TV, and podcasts these days. And it's all driven by pathological capitalists who only want to make more money. They just don't give a shit about you, even when you buy their products or services. Product support has dropped significantly in the last few decades. Anything that doesn't help the bottom line is no longer a priority in business. The long-term visions, the environmental considerations, the humane priorities, all these social needs that have got us this far in civilization, well, fuck it. Let's have open markets, deregulation, let's all make money. Who gives a fuck about the future consequences? To bring it all back and wrap up this episode, we want to take you to the world of the 35-plus-year-olds. Those in their 40s, 50s and 60s. Those who are at the highest of social potential. When you look at the world and the recent past, when you understand that it has taken over 35 years for a person to reach its maturest of life stages. When you can see that our recent past, the last 100-odd years, has been a shit show with multiple devastating wars and cold wars. When you add that there are 50 years of tetraethyl lead poisoning and the many other social impactful events, including social media, then you can understand why our societies have shifted to being more accepting of poor behaviour, more accepting of money being more important than humanity, and more accepting of pathological behaviours. It feels like humanity was lost at times over the last century. But there have been pockets of progress. Groups of people and ideologies that have fostered humanity back into civilization. The peace movement, people like Gandhi, Ram Dass, Martin Luther King, John Lennon and the Dalai Lama have all pushed love, empathy, consideration and care for our environment. These messages are still current today. And so finally we are starting to see through this pathological smoke cloud that hangs over our society from time to time. People are learning that not all people can be humans. It is with this new knowledge that people are waking up and refocusing their eyes on the world around them. Some might even call it being woke. Thanks again for taking the time to listen in. Today's episode was one of the more sensitive topics and may reopen some old wounds. Take some time to reflect on your life and make sure you reach out to family, friends, or your local support lines if you need to. We are all here to help each other, in theory. Too Many Arseholes is researched, written, and produced by Nobody's Project. To put this series together, we have drawn on many sources, publications, books, and podcasts. Throughout this series, we will ask you to go and read or listen to an article, book, or podcast to accompany our episodes. Check out our show notes for recommendations for upcoming episodes and also for our sources. It is important we acknowledge and promote the people and the work they have published that has inspired this project. And finally, we are always keen to hear from you. Do you have an experience, idea, or insight that you'd love to share with the project? If so, please send an email to contactus@toomanyarsholes.com. Visit our social media pages and please, feel free to get in contact and have a better conversation with us. To support the project, you can go to our Patreon page where you can get more information on the project and support us. You can also join our Patreon group and get early and ad-free episodes as well as other benefits. You can also like, subscribe and review the podcast to help spread the conversation. And the best way to support us is to share the podcast with your family, friends and colleagues so you can have a better conversation with them. Until we catch up again, give a shit about our planet and just please don't be an arsehole.